Morning you guys, it's Karen, and I thought I would come and tell you how I'm doing and talk about the things about grieving that have surprised me, because there's a lot of things that have surprised me, and I think this might be helpful to some of you because I know that a lot of you are also grieving. I've had so many messages and so many comments, and there's so many of you that have lost somebody either recently. There's a couple that have even lost people since I lost my dad, which was 3 weeks ago, and there's people that have lost loved ones a year ago, a few months ago, years ago, but are still struggling, you know. So apparently it's not something that's talked about very much, the grieving process. You know, people were saying they were surprised to see me on Instagram talking about it, because normally people just hide away. But I think for me, as I said on one of my Instagram posts, I expected that some people would criticise it because some people consider it to be a private thing, and I've no idea why, because we all go through bereavements, other than some people are just private. And my husband is one of those people, you know, but he had no judgments of me being public with it at all, because he said it's each individual deals with things in their own way. But for him, certainly, he would be one that wouldn't want anything public at all. I actually only got one person saying perhaps this should be private, and I guess because she felt uncomfortable, because I had filmed, actually it was the day after he died, I had filmed me sitting on the edge. I'd gone for a long walk, and I ended up by this sort of breakwater, and I was sitting with my dad's shirt looking out, and it was very, very calm and very beautiful, and I filmed it. What I didn't realise is I had pressed the start button, and I was sort of sobbing. I was like, you know, that, and I hadn't actually realised that until I watched it later, because there was a comment left on it on my Instagram story. But I'm not going to do a video just of me crying, you know, but like I said, I do think it's helpful. It's not something I'm embarrassed about, and I do think it would be good to talk about it, and a lot of people have told me that it's helping. So first, some of the questions that I've had about him dying, you know, like, how did it happen? Was it COVID? Is the biggest question. Was it COVID? We don't know is the answer, but the medical opinion from the doctor is that it was his heart. He believes it was his heart. But what completely threw me was he may go down as a COVID statistic, because they can't say it wasn't COVID. So I had spoken to my dad on the Friday, and he said he was having trouble breathing. He was sleeping when I phoned him. He's been sleeping a lot when I phoned him over this lockdown, which I assumed was partly due to lockdown. You know, they didn't have anywhere to go. He was sort of just feeling lethargic, and, you know, he does sleep a lot anyway. He's had heart problems before. And so I didn't think it was that unusual. I was concerned about him because when I saw him, when I delivered his shopping, and I saw him just in the foyer, I've never been into his flat in the whole of the lockdown, but he was very unstable on his feet. And I did say, oh Dad, I'm a bit worried about you. You know, you're very tired lately and you're a bit unstable on your feet. So when I spoke to him on the Friday, and he said he was short of breath, he was struggling to breathe, that's what he said. And I said, you really ought to phone 999, or you should at least phone the GP, you know. And he said, oh, no, it's in... First he said he should get his GTN spray, which is for his angina. But I said, well, is it like angina pain? And he said, no, it's more like indigestion. And so when he said that, I thought, okay, I'm sure it's fine, because my dad isn't really one to not call for help when he needs help. You know, he's definitely one that if he's got a chest pain, he would call an ambulance. So I just assumed that it wasn't that bad. He then died on the Saturday. He stayed in bed. He got up very briefly on the Saturday morning, went back to bed, and just went to sleep and didn't wake up. His wife has now told me that he had a cough, but not a continuous cough. She said he was coughing every day, but not continuously. To me, that is a continuous cough if you're coughing every day, but he was also a smoker, so he had a smoker's cough. Did he have a temperature? She was saying that he was cold and sweaty a lot of the time, but they didn't actually have a thermometer, so they never took his temperature, so he could have had a temperature. And then, of course, he was struggling to breathe. So all of that, to me, would suggest COVID. But the GP's opinion was that he would have been struggling to breathe for a lot longer, that it doesn't come on that quickly, that it's a much slower process, and he would have really been struggling to breathe, like I would have heard it, because I didn't hear in his voice that he was struggling to breathe. He sounded okay. It wasn't like, you know, or anything like that. He was just talking normally. However, somebody else that we know, his wife is a surgeon, and she was saying that it can take hold that quickly in older people or in people that have problems. So it's really unclear. I was really surprised that they weren't doing a COVID test as standard. Like, I asked the paramedics and I was like, okay, you're doing a coronavirus test now? And they were like, no, that's something that you can potentially request afterwards, but it would be as part of a post-mortem, you know. So did he die of COVID? No, the doctor believes that it was his heart because of the being unstable on his feet, being very, very tired. His heart was clearly failing. He's had 2 heart attacks before. He is a smoker. He eats fatty foods. He's diabetic. You know, he isn't the healthiest living person, or wasn't the healthiest of people. So the opinion is that it's his heart, but like I said, we were told it may go down as a COVID statistic, which, like I said, that just blows my mind, because then it means that all the statistics, you can't even believe the statistics because they're wrong, because we don't know. So we don't know, so we'll put it down as it might be COVID. That's just bizarre to me. The way that it happened was Eve had gone in to tell my dad to take his tablets, to remind him to take his tablets, and she couldn't wake him up. Eve, his wife, is deaf. They've only been together, they got married, they've been married about 1.5 years. So she is deaf, so she went to the community alarm and pulled the alarm. She then also tried to phone me, even though I wouldn't be able to, no, she wouldn't be able to hear me. She was phoning my phone, and then I would answer and she would just hang up and phone it again, and she was saying things. She was also holding the phone against the community alarm. She had been screaming down the alarm that Dad was in a coma because he was diabetic. And he was very grey when she'd gone through. She thought he was in a coma. And I mean, if she thought he was in a coma, I don't know why she didn't give him his glucose. But anyway, I suppose she was panicked. And she also stood at the front door and was calling for help. And actually a carer that was in the building went to her and stayed with her until the paramedics got there. I, as well as getting calls from Eve, got a call from the community alarm people who told me that Eve had pulled the alarm and was saying that my dad was in a coma, so could I go across there? I went straight across. I phoned my husband on the way, and I actually said to him, I think he's gone. I said, I've just got a feeling that he's gone and that he's not in a coma. I said, but that's where I'm going just now. And he was on his way back from walking Watson, and he said, right, I'll meet you there. And I said, oh, there's no need, you know, you don't need to be there. You can take Watson home, and, you know, I'll ring you and let you know what's going on. But I've done that with a few situations, and Kev was just like, okay then, and he just turns up anyway, you know. So I sped to my dad's. When I pulled into my dad's close, Kev was outside of the car and the ambulance was there, and there was 3 paramedics outside. So I kind of knew, like, if they had managed to revive him from whatever had happened, then he would have been off in the ambulance on his way to hospital, because you can't go with him now, you know, during lockdown anyway. And remember, we're behind everybody else in England. We're still in pretty much lockdown. So we wouldn't have been able to go with him. And so I kind of knew from that, I was like, he must be gone, because otherwise why are the paramedics just standing there? They wouldn't just be leaving him at home. They would have been taking him in. And also my husband was there, you know. And apparently my husband had been told by the paramedics that as soon as he saw me to arrive, he was to make me go to the ambulance, inside the ambulance. But I got out and I was just, I feel bad about this now, but I got out and was saying, is he dead? He's dead, isn't he? He's dead. Tell me now, is he dead? And they were going, just come in the ambulance. And I was like, no, tell me, is he dead? You know. And I shouldn't have done that. And I actually later apologised to the paramedic, because I was shouting at him saying, no, I just want to know. You just tell me. I don't want to bloody sit down. Just tell me. You know, I just wanted to know. And I wanted to go in and say goodbye to him and see him. So eventually they did get me in the ambulance, and they went, yes, I'm afraid he has died. And, you know, I was like, what happened? And they were like, we don't know what happened, but he looks very peaceful. He's died within the last hour. And they didn't know why. The form that they gave me just said asystole, meaning no heartbeat, you know. So I asked them immediately, am I allowed to go and say goodbye to him? Can I go and say goodbye to my dad, you know? And they said, absolutely. They said, we will give you a mask and gloves, because we don't know if it's coronavirus, but we can't force you to keep them on, you know, so it's up to you. And it just didn't even enter my head that I was going to keep them on, you know. I didn't even think I wasn't. I was just like, okay. So they gave me the mask. I put the mask on and I put my gloves on. I was telling Kev off for leaving Watson in the car, and I was like, please go and get Watson, you know, but don't bring him in the flat, kind of thing. And so I went into the flat and saw Eve, and then asked if I could go through, and I went through. And I took my mask off and I kissed him on the head, and I was just, you know, obviously really upset, and was kind of obsessed with keeping him warm, because the sheet was only up to sort of the middle of his chest, and I was pulling the sheet up and trying to cover him up because he looked cold, and he felt cold. And when I kissed him, he did feel sweaty. Like I said, it didn't occur to me about the whole COVID thing. I was just like, he's my dad. This is the last chance I ever get to see him and say goodbye to him, So I said goodbye to him and went back in to check on Eve. And then there was loads of people there, and I didn't know that this was how things happened. But it's like, right, okay, I don't know what to do now. Like, what happens now, My husband had come in and he was saying that we have to phone the undertaker. My dad had a funeral plan, a very basic funeral plan, and I knew that was like back here at my house. So what we did was we said, right, we'll go back to my house, get the funeral plan so we can find out which undertaker to call, and then we'll come back. On the way over here, I phoned a friend and asked her if she would take Watson. And so he went and had a ball with his friend, and that was just such a weight off my mind, because I was like, I knew Watson would feel there was a weird energy. I didn't really want him to see my dad, because he loves his granddad. He absolutely adored him. And I just wanted him to be in a normal situation, if you like. So that was really good. So we came home, got the paperwork, and then went back. And then Kev kind of took over because I was, trying to look after Eve, and I was telling Eve that we were going to go, she was going to come with us and stay with us. And I was getting her stuff together, and I went in and spoke to Dad again. And like I said, Kev just took over everything. He called the undertakers, they arrived, and they were very respectful. Eve was very, very upset when they were taking him away. I was upset, of course. It was just all very, very surreal. So after Dad was taken away, we gathered a few of Eve's things and took Eve with us, and basically stayed here for the next 2 days trying to sort things out, because there's an awful lot to do, so much to do that I didn't realise. And I think, it was a mix of doing things and crying, and doing things and crying, and I would go off for walks on my own, and it was just all completely like a dream. How I feel now is I'm starting to get a little bit of normality back in my life just now, which is 3 weeks later, but it's still so unpredictable. I've learnt so many things from this grieving thing, and one of them is how unpredictable it is. You think that you'd be crying for, I don't know, a week, and then you might cry a little bit less for the next week and a little bit less the next week, and it just doesn't work like that. My husband actually said I held myself together very well for the first 2 weeks. Apart from the walks that I went on, I didn't really want to cry in front of my husband, which I was surprised at. But I went on these walks and was, really sobbing away. And it was normally like 6 o'clock in the morning, so I knew I wouldn't see anybody I knew, I wouldn't see any of the dogs I knew. And it was very, very quiet. But it's so unpredictable, that then after 2 weeks, I sort of fell apart because I had stopped looking after. I was trying to help with Eve and trying to do all the executive stuff, which, like I said, has really surprised me how much work there is to do. And it's not until you've got a minute to yourself that you kind of fall apart. And I just had to keep it together before then. I had to arrange the funeral. Arranging the funeral was a big job in itself. I had to write Dad's eulogy. I didn't have to go up and speak, but my dad's pastor, who agreed to do it for us, he's so lovely. He said that in his experience, people that try to do it always feel better, even if they don't end up doing it. Because I said, I don't know whether I can actually do it. I don't know whether I'll be able to talk about him. I think I'll just break down, So the plan was that Kev would stand next to me, and he did. And I did manage to do it. I think my voice broke at a couple of bits, but I managed to get through it. So I'm really proud of that. And a lot of people told me that, the eulogy was really nice. But planning the funeral was an awful lot of work, and you realise you're trying to please everybody, because my dad had 5 children, and I kind of wanted everybody to have a little bit of input. So I was trying to put bits that they had said about him into the eulogy. I was also trying, I asked them all for what they wanted music wise, but then of course there's so many songs and we were only needed to have 3 songs. So it was difficult to try and please everybody, but I think I did an okay job in the end. Dad's family weren't able to come to the funeral because of lockdown. So the lockdown rules were we were allowed 10 people at the funeral maximum, and there was to be no hugging, there was to be no singing. But thankfully they did do a live link. We were able to give a live link to my family. Now, some of my family initially were wanting to come up anyway, and they were just going to sleep in their car, because the problem is they're not supposed to be travelling that far, and there's not really hotels and whatnot for them to stay in. We're not allowed, I wouldn't have been allowed to do an after party type thing, what do you call that, the wake. In normal circumstances, I would have had people here to have something to eat afterwards, to chat about it, but all we did was take Eve with us afterwards back here, because I think because Eve was on her own and she's deaf, it was, extenuating circumstances. So it was an emergency, and so it was okay. So the funeral was a bit odd. It was quiet, there wasn't, like I said, there was no singing, but I did the eulogy. Somebody read the All Is Well poem, which I just loved. The pastor told a lot of stories about Dad. He was a good friend of Dad, so that was really nice. It was actually a really nice service, which I never thought I would say, because I was can't say I was anti-funerals, because I understood that everybody gets something out of a funeral, but I didn't ever feel like I got anything from any of the funerals I'd been to. And so particularly my nan's, I was devastated when my nan went, and the funeral, to me, especially because it was a lot longer afterwards. My dad's was only a week and a bit afterwards, but in England it takes a lot longer. And I felt like it was just a day to be sad. It wasn't, I didn't gain any closure. I suppose because I didn't see her as well. I didn't see her at the end because I was in Scotland, she was in Kent. And I just didn't feel like I got anything from that funeral. But from my dad's, I felt like there was a little bit, not closure, but I knew that I was leaving him in the coffin, in the crematorium, and that was it. He was going to be gone, And like I said, it was nice that everybody, there was the 10 people there, and they were made up just of his friends, and like his ex-cleaner wanted to come. I actually could have filled it twice. There could have been 20 people there that none of them were family, and that was really nice that and everybody was telling me what a lovely man he was and what he meant to them, and so that was really nice. So that was the funeral, and like I said, we brought Eve back here, kept her for a couple of days, and I've sort of spent a bit of time trying to help her, because my dad was her main carer. The things I've learned from grief, I've put some notes down here. Like I said, it's unpredictable. You can get up and feel okay one day and want to do something that you never thought you might want to do. So for example, on the afternoon after the funeral, we had Eve here for lunch, then we took her home. She wanted to go for a nap, and I said to Kev, let's go for a drive and just get an ice cream from a supermarket and have an ice cream. I couldn't believe that's what I wanted to do. I wasn't upset. I felt a bit of calm for the first time since him dying, actually. It didn't last long, but I felt it. So it was unpredictable. It was all consuming. Like, you don't think of anything else, it's really all you're focusing on. It's exhausting. I didn't sleep very well. Even if I felt like I was okay and I felt really tired, I just couldn't stop my mind thinking. Of course, I'm thinking of all the things like, should I have insisted more that should I have called 999 just because he said he was struggling breathing, or should I have convinced him to go? Because what we figured out was that he did know something was going on. There's a lot of things that gave us that information, but he did know something was wrong with him, but he didn't want to go in because he didn't want to leave Eve on her own. He didn't want to be on his own in hospital. He was scared of getting the virus. I don't think he thought he had the virus. I think he thought there was something going on with his heart, but he was holding on until the last minute, if that makes sense. So of course there's a lot of thoughts with that. Should I have done this? Could I have got there faster? Could I have done CPR on my dad? Because obviously Eve couldn't do it because there was nobody could talk her through it because she couldn't hear. All of these questions you need to process, and you need to think them through, and hopefully conclude that it doesn't make any difference. What will be, what's happened has happened, what's done is done. There's no change in it. Other things that I learned is that I learned a lot of silly things, if you like. For example, you may remember I had that diabetic scare, and I swore that I was going to be healthy eating afterwards and whatnot, and I definitely changed a lot after that, and I was starting to lose weight. I don't have any sugar anymore. I pretty much didn't eat sugar before, but I was having agave and thinking that agave was okay because it's not as bad as sugar. It doesn't affect your blood sugar as much. But I've now changed to using a sweetener. What am I using? Erythritol. And that in itself, just having that as a replacement seems to be making a difference. Anyway, my dad was diabetic, and what I learned was I do not want to live with that much medication. I mean, he had a great big cabinet with needles and insulin and whatever else you use and all of his medication, and there was just so much medication, and I took 2 bin bags full to the pharmacy for just my dad. That wasn't even Eve's had her own cabinet. And I just at that point thought, I don't want to live like that. I've already got a big box of medication. I would like to reduce that. I don't want to live my life on all of that medication, because often Dad would say he was tired, and I would look at his medications and say, you're on beta blockers, and a lot of the drugs he was on for his diabetes and his heart would have made him tired. And so it was difficult to know, was he tired because of the medication, or was he tired because of something else? Because he always seemed to be tired. And I don't want to live like that. So that's one thing I learned. I learned that being an executor of an estate is a huge responsibility and a lot of work. I quickly realised that it's my responsibility to pay any of his debts. Now, he so far hasn't had any debts, but that can include, for example, he gets a disability allowance. I didn't close down his banks. You have to close down everything, his banks, all the insurances he had for his mobility trolley. He'd insured everything, his freezer, everything. I had to transfer all that to either Eve's name or close it down, let the council tax know, let the rent people know, let everybody know. And if he was paid disability allowance from the date he died until the date I closed the bank down, then obviously I have to pay it back. And there's a lot of things like that. You're basically responsible for any debt he has. And like I said, thankfully he didn't have any debt. I'm still trying to figure out if he had a credit card, and I don't think he did. I can't find evidence of one. I'm sure somebody would have got in touch by now. And yeah, it's an awful lot of work. I've spent days sitting at this computer, filling in forms, getting the death certificate. My husband actually dealt with getting the death certificate, but then I had to scan it in and upload it, and you have to give evidence of who you are. I had to send my passport, and I had to send this death certificate. So there's a lot of admin to do, which I never ever realised would be so much work. The other thing I learned is that people will surprise you. People have surprised me so much since Dad dying. And some of it is in a good way, and some of it not so good. I've heard that it brings out the best and worst in people, and it really, really does. And I've been so surprised by all the amazing things people have said about my dad, that I did think, I never knew that. I never knew that you felt that way about my dad. Nobody ever said that. And I wish they'd have said it to him, because Dad was not a secure person. He was an insecure man that didn't think people... I think he often thought people didn't like him. I remember I took him to where I was working in the NHS. I took him in the hospital, and he met a few people I worked with. And afterwards I got a text from one of the girls, and she went, "Oh, your dad's lovely." And I told him, and he went, "Oh, I didn't think she was that bothered to meet me." It just always... He didn't look at the negative side, but he never believed that people felt a certain way about him, and it was something that always worried me. I wish he had more confidence, And so hearing all these things from people was just like, I wish you'd have told him when he was alive. I did try my very best to tell him. We said I love you every time we spoke. I'd spoken to him on the Friday, and I remember I said to him, "I'm going to let you sleep, Dad. I love you." And he said, "I love you too." And that was that. And we had talked in the conversation about meeting for a walk, because the lockdown was about to be lifted to where you could meet your family outside. So I said to him, "When you're feeling better, we'll do a walk in the local park, and you can see Watson, because he loves Watson, and get some fresh air." He goes out on his mobility scooter, and it was lovely, So I tried to tell him how proud I was of him. I told him I was proud of him for moving up to Edinburgh, at his age, for starting a new life. And I was really surprised at how many people adored him. I've been surprised at, there have been really only 2 that I can think of, but 2 separate people that have kind of avoided me and been very awkward when when one of them's seen me, the other one I haven't seen or heard from. And they're both people that know how close I was to my dad and how devastated I would be. But like I said, they just one hasn't said anything at all. I haven't even heard from them. And the other one I've seen, and they just acted a bit odd and were like, "Hi, how are you?" And it's like they knew what was going on because I told them. And that surprised me. The people's personality in this situation has surprised me. Eve has been so resilient, bless her, and she's lost her partner in life, for the second time in her life, but she's been so resilient. And friends have been have gone over and above. You know, my friend has sent me care packages and I never expected that, you know, and I always knew that, like, I wouldn't have ever expected that. She was a good friend because she sent me a card and she was checking in on me every day, and that was enough. And then she went over and above, you know, and just little things like that have really surprised me. I got a letter from somebody that is my sister's friend, and she sent a letter to her saying how much my dad meant to her, and that was surprising, you know. So there's a lot of surprises from people. There's a lot that I have to be thankful about, and I'm trying to really cling on to these things. So I went through the whole, could I have got there faster? Could I have made Dad go into hospital on the Friday? You know, was there anything I could have done to have prevented this? And the answer is I'll never know, because if I'd have made him go into hospital on the Friday, he may have died anyway. You know, like, I could have called 999 and they may have got there too late. Well, they wouldn't have got there too late, but they may have taken him in and he may have had a heart attack in the hospital and they may not have been able to get to him. It feels like it was just his time, and that I've been through every possibility and none of them have a great ending. You know, like, if he'd have died in hospital on his own, that would have been awful. We just don't know, you know. It just, like I said, it felt like it was his time. And the things that I'm thankful for are he didn't suffer at all. My biggest worry about Dad was that he would get lung cancer, actually, because he was a smoker, a heavy smoker, since he was like 6 years old. Yeah, he started smoking that young, and when he died he was 76, so 70 years smoking. He'd had a really, really rough life, and I just thought he's going to die of a horrible disease that will make him suffer, you know. That was my biggest fear, and he didn't. He went to sleep and just didn't wake up. I have to say, the paramedics said he looks very peaceful. I didn't find him to look peaceful. To me, he looked grey, he looked sweaty, he looked cold, and his tongue was sort of out like this, which to me, nobody sleeps like that. So to me, didn't look peaceful, I have to say. Most people have said that when they saw their relatives, they did think they looked peaceful, but to me, he didn't. I was like, no, he doesn't look peaceful, he looks dead. And so I'm quite traumatised by that experience, I have to say. I didn't find that any kind of comfort at all. We were there for a couple of hours, and I didn't want him to go because that would be final, but at the same time, I found that very, very traumatic. Anyway, that's kind of an aside, but I'm so glad that he didn't suffer. I'm so glad he wasn't alone. You know, he'd literally seen his wife that morning. They'd spoken that morning. So he was alive when he woke up. They said good morning. She'd just gone in to remind him about his medication. He was at my wedding. I know that a lot of you that have lost your dads didn't have him at your wedding, and I'm so glad that I got to have him walk me down the aisle. I thought that was Kev coming to talk to me. He didn't suffer. He wasn't on his own. He didn't have to go into a care home. That was another big fear of mine, because again, I had to go through that with my nan. She did not want to be in a care home. Who does? Everybody wants to be independent. And so when you get to that stage where they need a care home, it's just the most horrific thing ever. And so I was dreading that with him, because I knew he would never want to go into a care home. He was in sheltered housing, but that was all. And so I don't have to go through that. So there's a lot that I have to be thankful for. And I think you need to find the things to hold on to. Like, even if you have a relative that died of cancer and they did suffer terribly, I think if it was that way with Dad, I would say, well, at least I had some time with him to say goodbye, because what I haven't had is I didn't get to say goodbye to him when he was alive. And if I'd have known he was going, I would have just loved to have given him a hug, because I haven't hugged him because of this stupid bloody virus, you know, for months. And I would love to have just given him a hug and said, you know how much I love you, you know how much I'll miss you and how much you've done for me. And so I think there's always a way of finding the positive in it, although it must be horrendous to see somebody suffer. And I'm not taking that lightly. My brother died of cancer, stomach cancer, and it was hideous. But my dad got to say goodbye to him. We all got to say goodbye to him. And you are then somewhat prepared. So in all circumstances, there are things to be thankful for, which is really, really hard. Certainly in the first few days, the first couple of weeks is hard. But now, like I said, just over 3 weeks on, I do think of that. I do think I'm glad he didn't suffer. I'm glad he wasn't alone. I'm glad he was at my wedding. I'm glad he isn't in a care home. So where am I at right now? Honestly, people are asking me how I feel, and I don't know. I don't really know the answer to that, because as I sit here right now, I'm okay. And I've just done 2 videos talking about things that don't really interest me that much. I'm like, they obviously interest me because I've ordered them. I got the Inky hair care and the No. 7 retinol. But I found that the world feels flat. And I think the virus is a lot to do with it, because the virus obviously made things much more difficult. But I feel flat about most things. There's nothing exciting me at the moment. But like I said, a lot of that is the virus, because we were supposed to be on holiday. We haven't got a holiday plan because we don't know when the world is going back to normal. I can't meet my friend for drinks and chat with her about my dad. She attended the funeral by live link. She said she was tempted to go, but we both were like, we'd want to have a hug if she was there, you know, but I can't meet her for drinks. She's in a different city to me. So I can't see her even in the garden, you know, and we don't want to see each other until we can just be normal and have a hug and have a drink and whatnot. Or lunch at least, not necessarily a drink. That makes me sound like an alcoholic. So yeah, it just all feels a bit odd at the moment, and a flat is the best way I can describe it. And then some days I'm okay, and then like I might be okay now, but then something will trigger me. I've noticed that I'm very emotionally fragile, and if somebody just said they didn't like my hair, I'd probably cry my eyes out. Or other things will trigger me. Like I was watching Henry, what's he called, Tyler Henry, it's a psychic thing, and somebody said they thought they'd be there for the moment of death, and that's what I thought. And that really upset me, and then I was, you know, crying my eyes out. And so I could be fine for most of the day, sobbing for a little bit, and then really tired, because it really exhausts you, and it's just so unpredictable. From everything that everybody tells me, it's something you learn to live with. It's not something that goes away. It's not a wound that will heal, but there will come a point where I'll smile and remember, well, there's already I already do smile, because he is and was an amazing man, and the memories I've shared on Instagram have been really special memories to me. But it all still feels too painful at the moment. This week in particular is difficult because my husband is going to collect my dad's ashes at some point this week. I think they said they'd be ready from tomorrow onwards, and I don't know exactly when Kev's going, but knowing that they will be ready, they're ready from today actually. She was waiting to get the scatter tubes in. Makes me aware that his body no longer exists, and this weekend just gone, I've really struggled with that, because, well, I don't know why. I was going to say because what? I don't know why. I knew he was going to be cremated. I didn't know when he was being cremated, but it just doesn't compute in my brain that my dad's body isn't even here anymore. You know, there is nothing left of him. Nothing, not even a body in the ground. And I don't know why I'm struggling with that, but I really am struggling with that at the moment. And so I think when I actually get given the ashes, that will be hard. I don't know what I'm going to do with them. I'm certainly going to keep them for a while, because, you know, you're not supposed to make any decisions in the first little while when you're grieving. I'll definitely have like some jewellery made or something like that. But yeah, other than that, I am trying to get back to life. I feel like, in a way, I don't want to move on, because if I move on, then I'm kind of accepting that he's gone, and I don't want to accept that he's gone. I want to hope that this is just a bad dream and it's all going to end, and he's going to be like, haha, here I am, you know. But it's not. I know that I've got to move on. So I think that's, tell me if you've been through it, if you had that same argument in your head, you know. I think that's a real battle, because like I want to do this YouTube video, but I don't, because that's going back to being normal, and I don't want to go back to being normal because Dad isn't here, and there's nothing normal about that. You know, I've had him for 47 years and now he's not here, and I have his Father's Day card, which is this Sunday coming. I found his birthday card for me. It was my birthday the day after the funeral. You know, nothing is normal, but I have to go back to normal. I have to go back to work. I have to go back to living life. I can't just stay miserable forevermore, you know. Although my husband says that he thinks I can just, he's like, just don't worry, you know, we don't worry about the money. He's had a huge pay cut with the whole virus thing, and so I do feel like I do need to do something. And also, like I said, most people have children, and, you know, I've got Watson. Obviously we still need to look after Watson. He needs a lot of treatment. We're waiting to find out when he can have an operation, and so there's a lot going on. So you just have to get back to things, and it feels I feel like I'm betraying Dad in a way by getting back to normal, but I know I have to. Tell me if you know what I'm talking about at all. Something else I've noticed is a lot of people will tell me he's still with you, especially when I say, I can't get over his body not being here. They'll say he's still with you. The part of him that makes him him is his memories, is his personality, is not his actual body. But I don't feel him with me at all. And a lot of people say that they feel him. Eve says that she can feel him. I can't feel him. I would love to feel him near me, but I can't. And I know when things are back to normal, I will definitely do what I did after my nan, which was I'll see a lot of psychics and see if I can get him to talk to me. And I intend to have a tribute tattoo that says "Sail on Silver Girl," because whenever I was nervous, my dad would say to me, he would either say "Sail on Silver Girl" or "Your dreams are on their way," or he'd say "Sail on Silver Girl, I'm sailing right behind you." And they're lyrics from Bridge Over Troubled Water. I didn't know what they were at first. When he first said it to me, I was like, so I'm going to have "Sail on Silver Girl" done down my arm here. But at the moment we can't have tattoos, the lockdown and everything. So I think that's all to tell you. Anyway, I've been talking for long enough. But everybody's asking me how I am, and it's really difficult to answer, because this minute I'm this way, and next minute I'm this way, and one minute I'm so devastated I can't breathe, and next minute it can be almost as if I've forgotten it for a moment, So thank you so much for listening to me, and I'm so sorry for your loss if you are going through this. I'm so sorry for you, because obviously now I really know what you're going through. What makes me really sad actually is knowing that Kev has to go through this. I couldn't stop thinking about that in the first week or two. Was like, this is awful. How am I going to support Kev? Because Kev's a completely different person to me, and he's stepped up by doing all the practical things, which of course I'll do, but there's nothing you can do to make it better, and I was like, so I've just got to watch him in this pain, knowing how much pain it is. It's getting old is rubbish. But yeah, thank you very much for everybody's thoughts and everybody's lovely comments, and especially on Instagram. It's been great. There's a lot of pictures, old pictures of me, and stories about my dad on there if you're interested. And yeah, that's everything for today. I will speak to you again soon.